Hello and welcome. This is James from the DSO Imager channel. Today I'm going to go over a couple of images. I'm going to give you a workflow video on the Christmas tree cluster, Cone Nebula, this area of space, and then I'm also going to show my Dolphin Head Nebula. So the Dolphin Head Nebula, I mistakenly lost the PixInsight project file, so I can't do a workflow video on that one. But the big takeaway for this video, I think, that's going to interest a lot of people is I'm going to show how I deal with halos. And it's pretty quick, it's pretty easy, and both of these shots had large bright stars in them, and the camera that I used, the ASI 1600, is notorious for having halo issues due to the manufacturing process on that chip. Basically, the cover on top of the sensor is not AR coded. So that causes issues. But this technique should work for any type of halo that you may encounter, not just the 1600. Alright, so real quick, let's take a look at this. I don't think I have the number of subs. I wonder if it's still here in this script. I didn't get as much time as I typically do. Is this it? Oh, it is. Okay. So yeah, 38 frames of HA, 31 of O3, and 27 of S2. So I ended up tossing a lot of subs on this one, and also because it's it's late winter when I'm trying to get pictures of this, so it's already late in the season to get this. And a lot of the data was captured with the moon out. I was really. This is the first SHO target that I've tried with my AT115 EDT. So also some of the earlier pictures I was still dealing with backspace issues, and I have some tilt in the focuser, and that's been addressed for the most part. It's one of the corners still isn't great, but otherwise I've got it tamed for the most part. But anyway, so not as much as I usually get, but it still was enough to do a decent picture here. Alright, so here's our O3, and this is just auto stretched, and you can see right here in the center there's that halo here that I'm going to have to correct. This is it shows up in the O3 because that's a blue star. With the Dolphin Head Nebula, it's a red star, and you don't see this halo in the O3, but you get it in the HA. And my filters are Astrodon, so it's not like I'm using cheapo filters here. Not too bad. We have some green in there, but it's okay. And here's our S2. As usual, S2 gets some nice detail on a target like this. Cone's looking pretty good. I thought this structure was interesting. It shows up pretty good in the final picture. And here's HA. So, I mean, yeah, this looks pretty good. Let me show you the tilt. See how good the stars look on this end here? They're in focus pretty well. If I go over to this side, see, not as focused as well. And this corner up here is the worst of it. One of the things that I did is that early on, I found that the stars were super sharp here on the left and very badly out of focus here. And in my capture software, I use Sequence Generator Pro, I changed the autofocus. Basically gave it a region or cropped region of interest, right? So it crops 30% out, and so it's only doing the autofocus really based on the center stars, and that's giving me the best average across the field. Now I didn't start doing that until maybe the last handful of subs. So this image here and the Dolphin Head image, you don't see the improvements from that change in autofocus, but pictures that I'm currently working on, the stars look much better across the whole field. Alright, and just real quick, dynamic background extraction. I used it. Now, a lot of times I'll skip dynamic background extraction if the entire field's in Nebula, but if you look at how these were looking, they had some really dark patches here, and there was definitely some gradient in here because so much of this was taken with the moon out. So I still used it, and in this type of scenario where you really just don't have a blank area that you can put your reference points, I just put them in the corners. I look for a spot in each corner, and I just did a 4-corner dynamic background extraction, and it seemed to work pretty well. So what do we got? S2 here, there's the O3, and here's the HA. So in this case, all three benefited from running dynamic background extraction. Now you can see over here on the right, so I ran deconvolution against the S2 and the HA, right? Here's my little PSF for the S2. I did not run deconvolution on O3 because basically, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of detail here. And perhaps the stars could have benefited from it, but I mean, now that I'm using Star Exterminator to remove the stars and resize them that way, I didn't think I could get away without running deconvolution here. Alright, so anyway, I put everything in the LRGB combination tool, and I put the combined image. That was probably one of these. And I put this is the output that I get, and then I stretch it using the auto stretch function, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's this right here, right? So you just hit this little nuke button, you leave the channels unlinked, that way it's applying an auto stretch to each color, RGB, and then for at least for me, for narrowband images in general, that seems to work pretty well. It gives me the SHO color that I'm looking for, the starting color. So anyway, once I combine them, I move over to a new workspace just to give me some more a clean desktop to work on. Alright, so now what you're seeing here is the combined image. I've got a mask applied to it, and I have a mask over that star. And the reason I'm doing this is that what I've noticed with Star Exterminator, and I believe StarNet will do the same thing, it removes the star, right? This area here, but the brighter halo area gets left behind. And I mean, that wouldn't be a problem, except then when I resize the stars separately and put them back, I end up with like a black ring here. So my workaround for that is to just simply make a mask for any of the super bright stars where where Star Exterminator will do that to the star, and just protect the star so that it doesn't mess around with this. I mean, we're going to take care of the star anyway, separately. So that's what that mask is there for. And there we go. Stars are removed. You can still kind of see it, but without that mask there would be a dark circle here, and that would just be more of a headache to deal with. Alright, so let's quickly step through everything that I did here. Obviously, we've got some green and magenta to deal with. So they're subtracting green. We're inverting. We're subtracting green again. Take care of the magenta. And then, I mean, this is all curves work. Just playing with curves. Mostly the K value. Let me pull it up. Mostly RGBK and saturation. Those are the primary curves that I'm using for this part here. Inverting again. I decided I left too much magenta in there the last time around. Right, so my thinking is that I like to get some red, and if you take all the magenta out, you end up with yellow. And so that first time around I didn't take it all out, but I didn't like how things were evolving, so I went back and took it all out anyway. There are other ways to get the red back in. You can see I'm starting to get some of that in there. We got a mask on there, right? So there are different things that you can do here. So to make things red, to get red out of your yellow, or to kind of tilt things in the red direction, you just remove a little bit of green. Sometimes the SCNR tool is a nice way to do it because it does a nice balanced removal of it. Sometimes curves is a nice way to move it. So I don't have a preference. I try it each way and go with whichever one works the best for me. Yeah, some more curves work, and I did do some unsharp mask too. Alright, so I think this is where I ended up for the most part. Next, I believe I took care of that halo, so why don't we go over that right now. So now, there are more accurate ways to deal with halos, where basically you're measuring the background here and measuring the background outside the halo, and you try to mathematically match them, and that removes it. And that works really well, but it's a bit, I'm a little bit on the lazy side for that, so I just do a quicker, maybe less precise way. So in this case, our halo's blue, and so I create a blue color mask, right? And that's just script, utilities, color mask, and then you just pick the color that you want. Okay, and the blue color mask has identified or highlighted the halo. The halo is the worst part, so I'll just take this file into Photoshop and edit it out so that the only thing here is this. I mean, if you want to stay in PixInsight, you can do the same thing with Clone Stamp, but Clone Stamp it's kind of a pain in the ass to, pain in the arse to use. I find the brush in Photoshop is just easier, so it's just quicker and easier to do this in Photoshop. And what I ended up with was this. Alright, so I mean, we can do this real quick. So here's a copy that I made. Let's apply this mask. Okay, we'll do a preview box. Alright, let's hide the mask now. And it's blue. Blue is what we're worried about here. So I'll just go to curves, go to blue, and I just pull it back a little bit. See, that's a little bit too far. I mean, so I'm not doing a whole lot of care here. I'm kind of, let's see if we can get a better match. I mean, that's basically all I'm doing, is I'm just using curves to try to match the background just by eyeballing it. And honestly, my mask is probably not the best because you can see I'm still leaving some blue here, but I figured because there's so much blue in this area anyway, I just wanted to tone it down. So now that we have it set, I'll just go and drop that on there, and boom. Now, I mean, you gotta zoom in really far to see it. I think it blends in pretty nice. Basically what it's done is really bad halos have a tendency to, your eyes are drawn to it, right? So in this case, I've dialed back the intensity of this, and now your eye's not drawn to this halo. So that's basically what I did. Now you can see I got some grain in here. Usually I like to expose longer, and I don't get quite as much grain and a quick. I played with TGV denoise, and I played with a couple other denoises, but you know what? Sometimes Topaz denoise just does it nice, quick, and easy. So I ran it through Topaz, and I didn't use it for any kind of extra sharpening or anything. I just wanted to dial back the grain, and it did a really nice job. Alright, so next we're just going to work on the stars. And I mean, I don't do anything really fancy with the stars. This is where I ended up with. Let me just step it back. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, Alright, so 8 steps, but a lot of that's just tweaking. Alright, so this is what the stars look like. Obviously, with narrowband SHO images, you get a lot of magenta. So we're inverting, subtracting green, invert back. That took care of all of it, although you sometimes get some kind of hazy, weird colors. And this is often helped by subtracting green again. Oh, well, I pulled back on curves. Actually, I usually pull back on curves first, even before inverting. I did it a little out of order here. And the reason I do that is that when you pull back on curves, the color of the stars are less blown out. So pulling back on curves first gives you an idea of how much you need to work the colors. But anyway, you can see there's like some green in there. So we subtract the green, and then we start cranking up saturation. You can see sometimes the green starts to come back, so you just hit it with the SCNR tool again. Yeah, it's a little bit of a balancing act, because sometimes you can get some kind of funny colors in there if you pull back on curves too much. But anyway, this is what I ended up with. And with the narrowband stuff, I'm always looking for a nice distribution of the blue and the orange. And adding that back together gave me this result. So there's a final image. Alright, let's move this to the next workspace, and we'll take a look at Dolphin real quick. So Dolphin is another target. This was my first narrowband target with the 115, but this one is HOO, so no sulfur in here. And it's a target I've always wanted to shoot, and I never quite had an ideal focal length for it before, right? Because I was using 336mm with the 70mm scope, which would work fine, but it was a really wide field, and then of course the edge is just way too close for this. So I thought this was a really good focal length, and it was one of the first targets I wanted to go after. The thing is, I didn't realize how low this target was for us. I mean, it peaked at about 32, 34 degrees. I mean, I usually don't start shooting a target until it gets above 30 degrees. So with it so low, and we've had a lot of clear nights down here in Central Texas, but seeing condition has been poor. We've either had a lot of nights with poor seeing or a bright moon out. We've not had too many ideal nights out here. So I ended up tossing a ton. I think I tossed most of the subs, probably 50-60% of the subs on this. And what I ended up with was about 12 hours, 13 hours total. So a lot less than I wanted to go on it. And I mean, I think it came out okay, but I didn't have a chance to meet my expectations, I should say. But anyway, to give you an example of the halo, this was a test shot that I took while in the midst of collecting data, and you can see that the halo was huge on this star, and it was all in the HA and some of the sulfur. Excuse me, there's no sulfur on this. This is a HOO, right? So just a HA filter, and I addressed it the same way I just showed on the Christmas tree. So there it is. The one difference is my mask was perhaps a little bit too strong, and this area was dark, and so I did use the healing brush in Photoshop to kind of put something in here to make it blend better. So as a result of that, I mean, you can't really tell, but I suspect some of the structure, I mean, if you're familiar with how healing brush works, I suspect some of the structure right here around the edge may not actually be real, right? Like the healing brush manufactured some of this, but it's just a small area that was impacted by this, and it's the area that was obstructed by this massive halo anyway. So, but anyway, so there it is. There's my Dolphin Head, and we'll get the Christmas tree back up. Two late winter projects, and we are now in the midst of galaxy season, and I've got some exciting stuff coming up, both with this scope and with my 8-inch edge. So in closing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, any ideas or comments around the method I'm using for dealing with the halos, and certainly any other questions are welcome. Clear skies.